Hey guys, it's Miss Knappenberger. Hope you guys are having a great day so far. Um, it's still kind of late at night and my brain is still a little bit silly, so if I make a couple of errors of speech or something like that, please just roll with it. I'm going to go ahead and start my timer at 45 minutes and see what's up. Why is this different than it normally is? Here we go. All right, I have cleverly titled this Middle Bits, Period 3. What's Europe up to, anyways? All right, our main idea is that Europe may not have unified under the banner of the old Roman Empire like the Byzantine Empire did in Anatolia, aka modern day Turkey, but it was unified somewhat with the belief system of Christianity. By the end of the time period, the Byzantine Empire is on the verge of collapse and Western Europe is poised to take over the world. I did all that talking and then I didn't do any writing. Silly me. Remember, you cannot just say Christianity. You have to say what variety, what brand of Christianity it is. It is Roman Catholicism in Western Europe until, of course, King Henry VIII comes around and founds Anglicism, and good old Martin Luther is all up there with Protestantism. Belief system of Christianity. Good times, good times. All right, so I forgot I put this in there. This is a scene from Pocahontas saying these white men are dangerous. Essentially, that's where we end up, is that this is meant to be tongue-in-cheek, but essentially Western Europe starts pushing out and starts taking over everything and essentially exploiting everybody they can manage to for their own profit and gain. Okay, so when I say what can you glean about Europe from this topographical map, obviously I cannot ask you, but I would like you to notice a couple of things. First off, up here, this country today is mostly all mountains. I can never remember which one it is of the three for some reason, but it is basically all mountains. Also, look at poor Iceland over here, all mountains. You can see the Alps over in here. And then you can see how Greece is mostly mountains and a lot of Rome is mostly mountains. You can also see I believe these are the Pyrenees right here separating Spain and France, some more mountains over here in France. But you can also see that there's a lot of flat territory out here, a lot of flat territory in France and Germany, England, Ireland, making it very ideal for farming eventually and stuff like that, Denmark, stuff like that. I would also like you to notice that this bit is basically underwater, yet that's Amsterdam. It's basically underwater today, but there's lots of opportunities for growing farmland. There's lots of nice, flat, fertile areas. Now, from this one, this is in Celsius, so it is a little bit more difficult to read, but hopefully the colors will sort of indicate to you the browner, warmer colors are warmer temperatures, and the cooler colors are the cooler temperatures. And again, you can kind of definitely see from this that, like northern Russia, there ain't a whole heck of a lot going on up here. If you are going to be a port in Russia on the western side, you basically have to be over here somewhere, or else you're frozen 9-10 months out of the year. Can you even imagine coming from the north up over here? Crazy. So that's why the Russians are always so keen to get their hands on this area, is because those nice warm water ports. You can also see this whole sort of area is very nice and Mediterranean, but all of it is very nice, warm, temperate, again, super good for growing things. And especially combined with the end of the last little ice age, it's like super fertile, super wet, super warm. It's perfect for farming. It's perfect for explosive population growth. All right, so the Dark Ages. Since I put all of this up, I know all of you are going to write it down immediately, so here we go. Let's just do it myself too. All right, so this time period in European history is super famous for being called the Dark Ages. That time where nothing is happening. Everybody's in the dark. There is no culture. There is no education. There is no government. There is nothing. It's just like bleak and black and sad. That's not quite what's going on during the Dark Ages. The so called traditional hallmarks of civilization are very much not there. There's basically no education on a widespread scale. There's still education, but it's mostly for the super wealthy or just the religious in order to pursue those religious purposes. There's very little political uniformity, so the governments do not look very much the same, and there's very little political unity, so there's not like large governments controlling large amounts of territory, and the population is really broken up into very small areas. There are not these sort of really dense urban centers like in a lot of other civilizations. This is not Constantinople. This is not, Chang'an. This is not um, Mecca or something like that. This is very small, very rural. It's also so called the Dark Ages because it is bookended by periods of so-called high civilization. You've got the Roman Empire on one end, very much known as uh, the foundation of Western civilization, and on the other end you have sort of the Renaissance that sort of cemented that European position, Western civilization, the resurgence of art and culture and all that kind of stuff. But again, the Dark Ages really aren't quite that dark, and sort of they've been a little bit inflated with this idea of, oh, we have all these um, brutal Viking battles where people just stab each other in the eyeball and then it's all over. And like, okay, yeah, sure, that happened. That definitely happened. But there's also lots of other stuff going on during the Dark Ages as well. I do think that this is really a good graph to show sort of just how little education there was and how little stability there was in order to have education. Because again, if you have no political unity or uniformity, if you are not really coming together as a civilization to have all of those, to be stable economically, politically, you can't have stable education. It's just really not possible. You really have to have sort of those foundational stable things before you can reach the higher things. Very much like how you in your personal life, you have to meet those requirements for shelter, for not going hungry, for, having clothes to wear, shoes to wear, all that kind of stuff, before you can even begin to start thinking about really learning anything, which is why, children coming to school hungry is such a big deal. But you can really see when the printing press is brought to Europe or is invented in Europe, the movable type printing press, the output of manuscripts just skyrockets. The output of books just skyrockets. And of course, the easier it is to print them, the cheaper it becomes to print them, and the more you can have out there. So the more information is out there, the more it gets disseminated, the more people have access to it, and just the more educated everybody gets, and just honestly, better everything gets. And again, I'm not saying that, like, if you don't have any education, that these time periods are a waste of time or that we should discount them or we should write them off. But it sort of historically has been proven that if you have more education, you tend to have a more stable, at the very least, environment civilization. So we'll come back to that later, maybe. We'll see when I come home from mystery trip. All right, so we've got 2 eras in Europe. We've got the early Middle Ages. That's my jam. That's about 500 to 1000 CE, because that's when all the like Arthurian legends are and stuff. And if you have not watched the TV show Merlin, dude, get on that. It is cheesy and wonderful, and there's like really bad CGI dragons. Get on that. We got tons of Germanic tribes settled all around Europe. They're mostly pastoral nomads in the 500s. Or subsistence farmers. Subsistence farming means that you are not able to farm enough to have a surplus. And as we know, if you're going to create a major civilization, you have to have a surplus. So these farmers are creating enough food just to survive. They are not creating enough food in order to be able to have specialization of labor, to create art, to create complex bureaucracies and government systems. It's just not happening for them. Political leaders are your tribal chieftains. Uhtred, stuff like that. Arthur. Very few people can read or write. And a lot of times you could do one or the other. So you could read but you couldn't write, and you could write but you couldn't read. So like if you were, for example, living in a monastery, a lot of times they would have the younger monks be doing things like copying books. And in those kinds of situations, a lot of the monks did not know what they were reading. They weren't really reading things, they were just copying. So they knew how to write, but they didn't really know how to read. And then a lot of people knew how to read, they were functionally literate, but they didn't know how to write. And again, most things are written in Latin at this point. There's very little long-distance trade. And again, long-distance trade is global systems of trade is another sort of hallmark of civilizations. And they had very small towns. Settlements were villages and small towns. This is what I think of when I always think of like Beowulf, when you have, Beowulf coming to ostensibly a whole kingdom, and all it really is basically a village with an extra fancy hall and a monster problem. Although, really, is Grendel really a monster? We have to talk about it later. Then we have the High or the Late Middle Ages. This is sort of more those like knights in shining armor you always think about. The early Middle Ages are very much like, how do you know he's the king? He's the only one who isn't covered in mud, kind of a thing. And then the High Middle Ages are like, oh, we like actually have a court, a kingdom. It's pretty fun. We're like moving into Shakespeare, kind of a thing, and moving out and into the Renaissance, and it's a little bit more exciting. So they started to build up back up again, especially after 1200 CE. Towns are growing. Small cities are emerging. There's more long distance trade. It's pretty darn exciting. I'm going to be real, it's the Crusades that do that. Because they go over to the Middle East, they try all those Indian Ocean goods, and they're like, oh, these are fabulous. Who knew our meat didn't have to taste rotten? Wow, these spices are so good. This cloth is so good. We only had scratchy wool before this. And then, so they want to preserve those trade connections and stuff like that. Social class also grows more complex. We actually start to have a middle class. It's pretty exciting. Specialization of labor and artisans. Pretty darn exciting. And again, the Renaissance begins towards the end of this era. The Renaissance is super fun. This is when paintings of baby Jesus stop looking like creepy middle-aged mafia men, but shrunk. And they start looking more like children. Here we have a map of the invasions of the Roman Empire. I am pretty sure I already used this on a test. So you can definitely see that the Roman Empire is just getting hammered from all sides by these Germanic tribes and stuff like that. So not exactly a good situation. And then here is a different map of Europe in 650 AD. Again, this is kind of an old map because it uses AD instead of CE. That's okay. You can also see over here it says Mohammedan Empire and Mohammedan Conquest. Oh my gosh, I've never noticed this before. This is really old school. Mohammedan is actually a slightly offensive term because most people who practice Islam really don't like to use the name of the prophet in that way. They aren't worshiping the prophet. He is just a prophet. They're worshiping God instead. And so when you call them Mohammedan, they're sort of like, whoa, but we don't worship Muhammad. What are you doing? That's not what we're about. So the fact that they're calling them the Mohammedan conquests means that it's very old-fashioned. This map is probably quite old, actually. Not just that it's depicting Europe in 650 AD, but it was probably actually written rather a long time ago. This is another thing that's super fun about history, is watching maps change and how people interpret maps. We've got the Frankish kingdoms, that's the French. Burgundy, Orleans, Aquitaine, good stuff over there. Austrasia, Bavaria, super fun. We got the Slavs over here. We've got some Bulgarians over here. Thrace, what fun. Sicily, Sardinia, Corsica, of course, being where Napoleon comes from. And then over here, I love this, we've got the Visigothic kingdom. Excellent. And then don't forget up here, we've got the beautiful the Anglo-Saxons, the regular Saxons, and of course the Frisians. Excellent. The Frisians being sort of a big player in Beowulf if you read the songs, which I have stopped doing with my 5th graders because too much. All right, the early Middle Ages. Rome had provided order. Doesn't matter if you agreed with them or not, they knew how to get stuff done. Social order, political order, military order, what have the Romans ever done for us? Brought peace. When it collapsed, it left chaos. Can you even imagine? Can you even imagine, like, if the United States democracy was to collapse, like, tomorrow? I really don't want to be prophesying anything, but, like, if all of a sudden Congress just dissolved, the United States Postal Service just dissolved, and we all just kind of were like, whoa, how do I phone call? How do I road? This is crazy. What is this? That would kind of sort of be what it was like. We do have some continuing conflicts between Germanic groups. They used the Catholic Church, though, to build up a new structure and create a cultural unity. And again, it's Roman Catholicism. The Byzantine Empire is Eastern Orthodox. Cultural unity. 9 times out of 10, it's culture that will bring people together, not politics. Because politics is incredibly divisive, but, you know, everybody can get together on the 4th of July and eat a hot dog or a fake hot dog. Tofu hot dogs. But that doesn't mean that all those people eating hot dogs and tofu hot dogs can agree on how they feel about modern American politics. They have no unified political structure as well. There's no empire, really, just sort of small principalities. Political changes come with the Germanic tribes as well, and the government structures begin to reflect those Germanic tribes. So we have informal governments based on family ties. Nepotism. And personal loyalty. So, like, a really good example of this, I feel like, is in, if you're interested, there is a book series about a sort of Anglo-Saxon Viking boy named Uhtred, U-T-R-E-D, and they're kind of intense. I think I may have mentioned them before. There's a lot of, like, blood and pillaging and stuff like that. But Uhtred himself is essentially taken in as a slave by this other tribe, and because of his personal loyalty, he proves their worth to them, and he becomes really one of their own tribe. And so when they go back to his homeland, he's like, these aren't really my people. I haven't fought for them. Like, yeah, this is where I'm from, but it's all about that personal loyalty. And it's even about personal loyalty over family ties. They're not identifying with a state or a kingdom. We just sort of have these little tribes. They have oaths of loyalty in exchange for the important things: food, shelter, and weapons. It's difficult to make a widespread centralized government. It's always hard to do that, but it's especially hard when you have all of these intensely loyal, tiny little tribes. It's really hard to, like, convince them to support somebody who is not, like, a direct family member. Instead, we have what are called manors, and manors are sort of like overly large farms that are operated by leaders who protect others in exchange for labor. So again, this is not slavery. We're calling this both feudalism and manorialism. Feudalism is sort of the bigger sense of this, and manorialism is sort of the smaller version, limited to, like, a single farm, and feudalism is more like several farms, a town kind of a thing. But again, it's not slavery. These people are working in exchange for something. Slavery is where you are working in exchange for nothing. They earn wages still, they have lots of freedoms still, and they're working in exchange for protection. I also would really highly recommend Timeline by Michael Crichton. A bunch of people time travel back to medieval France, and it gets really gnarly really fast. And it really gives you a very good sense of what it would have been like to actually live in the Middle Ages. Everybody is dead immediately. This is a beautiful illustration from an illuminated manuscript known as the Doomsday Book, a French book describing, it's basically an almanac describing a bunch of different things going on. I really like whatever the heck these weird fishes are up here. I have no idea. And this possibly a ram. I don't know. But this is a really good example of a manor. So we have a big sort of castle in the background, and then we have a bunch of different types of fields out here. and the peasants who are working on the fields. Got our oxen, we've got our plows, all that kind of stuff, to help grow the food that will eventually benefit the castle and everybody else. So in times of siege, people are all going inside the fortified castles to be saved and protected. Here's another one of medieval manor. We have common pasture where you put all of your domesticated animals. You've got autumn planting, you've got spring planting, you've got what's called fallow, or letting the land recover and just sort of get back to where it needs to be. So what you would do is you would have this 3-field system and you would rotate. And then in the middle, you've got the actual manor house and the church. You've got a little bitty, like, the rest of the village over here, but it's close enough to the manor that they can, like, come right in. Always got to have a pond. Always got to have a pond. So manorialism, again, defines political and economic obligations between lords and their peasant laborers. What do you do when the chips are down? What do you do when there ain't no food? Lords and peasant laborers. Okay, so serfs, S-E-R-F-S, save your Hawaii jokes for another time. Serfs were people who lived on and were tied to self-sufficient agricultural estates known as manors. So they weren't super allowed to leave. So I said that it's not slavery. It's not, but also it's not super far off. They're not bought and sold. They have ownership rights to their own homes if they fulfill their obligations. But honestly, this is really not that different from today. I mean, if my husband and I don't make regular payments on our house payment, on our mortgage, on our loans that we have taken out and all that kind of stuff, bad things happen. And if we're not fulfilling our obligations, there are consequences, even in our society today. We're not serfs, but we're not that different either. They received protection, administrative justice. He stole all my cows. And the right to grazing land. And then he grazed my cow on my land, but called it his. In exchange, they had to stay on the land and give a portion of their harvest, their cattle, whatever they got, to their lord. But again, this is really not that different from like paying taxes or something like that. It's just that it's in a different way. We get protection from the police, from the fire service, from the emergency services, whatever we need, and in exchange we pay taxes for it. So it's really not that different. It's just sort of a smaller, more informal scale than we do. This began during the Roman era, and it developed because there was a lack of Roman protection. Sort of like how I talked about the ceramic piping in Pompeii began to wear away and everybody got lead poisoning because the Roman Empire wasn't able to take care of it. This is very much the same thing. The Roman Empire isn't able to protect them from the marauding Germanic tribes, and so they start grouping together in these nice small manors to try to take care of each other. Trade had also declined, so the emphasis was on barter, which I personally think is a fabulous system, and I really wish there was a lot more like bartering and being able to drive down haggling, being able to drive down prices. I feel like I would wear so much more like makeup if that was the case, and I would just try to like bat my eyelashes and be like, "You don't want to give me this for full price. You want to give it to me for less because I'm cute." Trade with outsiders is also limited. Manors are mostly self-sufficient. Money really isn't necessary. I think this is still very, very much true because, like, while we still use money, we still sort of use the barter system. When I'm hanging out with my girlfriends, like, we all know that we're gonna pay each other back at some point. So, like, one of us will be like, I'll get the tickets to the play that we're going to see, why don't you pay for dinner, kind of a thing. And then it's this very, like, barter system. Get us coffee the next time, kind of a thing. In terms of agricultural development, we've got the iron plate plow. I'm sorry, I spelled plow here differently than the other plow. They also use the 3-field system where they rotate. what crops they're putting where, and this allows one of the 3 fields to lay fallow, Fallow, which means that it's just sitting there and nothing is purposefully growing in it. And that's really good for the land to keep the land nice and healthy, because again, if you plant the same thing over and over again, it's drawing the same nutrition out of the soil, and so it uses up the nutrition. You need different plants to do different things. I'm still weirded out by the fact that plants probably feel pain. Horse collar also now means that you can attach the horse or whatever to the plow without choking the animal, which sounds pretty great. Here is a delightful illuminated manuscript inset describing the 3 different layers of society. We've got the peasant and his shovel on the right, the very fancy little knight in the center, and the clergy or the religious people on the left. He also looks like a Benedictine monk from his hairstyle, which is fantastic, and I love it at the end. We also will come back to that later, so sorry. Oh no, not another one of these. So the Roman Catholic Church, Constantine moves the Roman capital over to Constantinople because he's got to name stuff after himself. Hey, most of our parents do this, so can you blame him? So the 2 biggest religious centers were in Constantinople and Rome is still the head of the Catholic Church. It's not the head of the Eastern Orthodox Church, but the Roman Catholic Church, Rome is where it's at. Constantinople, again, their church leaders are called patriarchs, whereas in the Roman Catholic Church you have bishops, you have priests, you have archbishops, you have I can't really get lower than priests in my mind for some reason. And again, we have this concept of Caesaropapism, where the king is also the pope. Very convenient, very good for pulling people together politically and also culturally. Rome itself, the pope is in Rome. The kings need the backing of the pope to make them legitimate, and they are very totally separate. So we're in Constantinople, the king and the pope are the same thing, and the king is ruling over everybody, the political leaders, the religious leaders. In Western Europe, the kings have to rely on the pope to give them that legitimacy that they need in order to rule over people, that sort of divine right. So if the pope doesn't like you, you're kind of screwed. And so you have to do a lot of sucking up to the pope. They officially split in the 11th century or the 1000s, the 1000s? I don't know. And but they have been developing independently for centuries. Again, lots of little details that cause lots of friction. All right. Monasteries. Monasteries are so much fun. Monasteries are self-contained and self-sufficient religious centers in rural areas, usually. If you are interested in medieval monasteries, there is an excellent mystery series called the Cadfael Mysteries, Cadfael, I believe, and it's about basically this Benedictine monk living in 13th century England, solving crimes and living his best life. It's pretty fun. They have things like herb gardens, leatherworks, blacksmithing, everything you need to keep everything running on a very local, small scale. Monks are men, nuns are ladies, and they work there. You have to be, you take vows of poverty, so you're not personally being enriched. You also promise to not flirt with anybody, etc., and to be obedient usually to God, but also to the person who runs the head monk and stuff like that. They have a daily ritual of prayer, manual labor, because you should work, and simple eating. A crust of bread, a potato. But seriously, prayer starts at 4 in the morning, and you wake up, the bells toll, you wake up, you pray alone in your tiny little room that's literally called a cell. It's like a straw bed and hard stone floor, and you kneel on the floor and pray for 2 hours. And then you go and you meet up with all your bros, your monk bros, and then you pray together. There's some singing maybe, and then you get to have breakfast. But breakfast is hello, you get an egg and a slice of bread. You want butter? Too bad, butter's too fancy. Becoming a nun, however, was an alternative to marriage, and there were lots of ladies who went into the nunnery instead of that. In fact, one of the most famous lines in Hamlet is Hamlet shouts out to his at his girlfriend Ophelia, "Get thee to a nunnery." And in some ways, he's being insulting, and in other ways, he might be like, "You and I aren't going to work out. I'm too busy trying to murder my uncle. Like, you should probably just, go into a nunnery instead of getting married." Um, Also, a lot of women would go into nunneries when they were widowed or when they were over a certain age so that they could be taken care of. So a lot of like queens and stuff, when their kings died, would go into nunneries. So like I feel like Guinevere, Arthur's queen, also did that as well, but I can't remember. It's been so long and I've read so many different versions. Monasteries also provided a lot of services to the local peoples. And again, this is true of monasteries everywhere. So even though we're looking at examples in like England, France, Germany in the Middle Ages, this is true of monasteries that you would find in China, in Thailand, in India, in, Mali, Ghana, Shanghai, anywhere you're going and you're looking and you're finding monasteries, these are the jobs that they are doing. So they're providing medicine out of those herb gardens. They're providing sanctuary. They're protecting refugees. And when I say refugees, I don't mean like, I'm from Syria and my country is war torn and I'm coming over here because I need somewhere to live because my neighborhood was torn to rubble. I mean people who are maybe like victims of domestic abuse, or maybe they need, widows who have lots of children, kind of a thing. People who just need help, and they're providing that help. They are also providing education. They operated schools, they maintained libraries, saved books and writing, and they copied books and stuff too. It took forever and they were so expensive because everything, like every single page of these books is like a piece of art, every single one. So once you develop the printing press with movable type, you can, make your piece of art and then make 1,000 copies off of it so easily. Oh, excellent. An interior of a monastery. Look at all those beautiful pews. Pews! And then here's a shell, a skeleton of a monastery that is in ruins. Notice how it's right by a river. That's kind of super important for, doing work and stuff. Here's another monastery. You can see it's very church shaped, and then you have all these buildings in the foreground that used to be things like leatherworks and tanneries and stuff like that. I don't mean tanner flint, I mean places where, you make leather and stuff like that. You tan the hides. So here again is a map of a monastery. We have your church. Notice how it's in the shape of a cross. You've also got like a kitchen over here. You've got some chapter house. You've got some dormitories and stuff like that. I also really appreciate, is it not on this map? A lot of times too, they have like their own little cemeteries and stuff like that. Guest houses for people who are in need, the infirmary hall where you put the sick people, stuff like that. Okay, so a lot of people thought that in the Christian religion, there's this concept of like, what's the word I'm looking for? The doomsday, the end days, the end times kind of a thing. And they legitimately thought that was going to happen in the year 1000. It was very Y2K. And then the year 1000 rolled around and nothing ended. And so everybody kind of went, wait, what? Judgment Day is not here? Okay, I guess we should maybe start focusing on making the world a little bit of a better place, because it didn't end and everybody had kind of thought it was going to end, so nobody really invested as much time as they could have in stuff, because they were like, meh, rapture's coming, nah. So agricultural technologies and techniques are beginning to make a difference, and people are starting to live longer, be a little bit healthier. Your children live, more of them live to adulthood. They start using the stirrup in warfare, getting that from Central Asia. Duh, Mongols, they're the exception, they're exceptional. And monasteries, again, are helpful in so many ways. way to go, preserving knowledge and passing down ideas of medicine. In fact, the father of genetics was a monk, Gregor Mendel, and he would do experiments with crossbreeding pea plants and stuff like that, and doing all these observations of like, what does their little pea pod look like and stuff like that. And he is credited as being the like first person who looked into genetics and stuff like that. Viking raids are also controlled better by stronger regional governments, and so people are getting less battered by the Vikings. And also the Vikings are kind of tired of battering people, and they start settling down a little bit. You know, like all this raiding and killing and blood running everywhere. All I want is just a cute little house, couple of sheep. You know, my son Vladson. And so they begin to settle into the European communities, bring their stories with them, and then we get Beowulf. So, because populations are growing, because of increased and better agriculture, we get towns. Trade changes. So exciting. And again, here we have a very simple depiction of our fields. You either do like spring planting, autumn planting, and fallow, or you do like different crops in different ones. So they have oats and beans in one, and wheat and rye in another. And don't forget that you have like the sort of meadow area for your cattle to graze. This is a beautiful, delightful rune marker. And you can see all the cool runes on it and stuff like that. I always show this one in my 5th grade class, but it's good in your class too. And this is a cute little chessman. He could use some orthodontia. Yeah, okay, sure. And yes, he is holding his sword quite close to his eyeball. Yes, this may be a problem if he trips, but hey, also it kind of looks like he's biting his shield. Does anybody else see that? It's kind of delightful. But hey, at least they had chess. I say like I like playing chess. Feudalism discourages growth of strong central government, though. Man, I should make these blanks bigger, huh? Because everybody's loyal to their local lords, and that prevents any centralized loyalty. It would be like if we were only loyal to our senators and not to like a president or something like that. There's lots of conflict between rivals. Oh, so just like American politics today, serfs get protection from their local lords, and they don't move around a lot, and so they don't really want to. They don't really know about bigger ideas, having a stronger central government, and they don't really care because they don't need it. If they needed it, they would care. They don't. Who cares? The Roman Catholic Church also is a counter to kings. Again, you don't need kings to bring you together culturally because you've got the Roman Catholic Church. They make moral boundaries. You can and cannot do this. Thou shalt not kill. Thou shalt not text someone before 6 a.m. But they also have what's called canon law. You'll notice I have 2 different spellings. I'm so sorry. It's canon with 1 N, I'm pretty sure. Canon law is rules for behavior, but I can't remember which one it is. One of these canons is the one where you shoot people, and the other one is this kind of canon law. Canon law gives you rules for behavior that at first they filled the need for political authority, so the church is putting out rules for behavior and everybody's following that, but eventually it hamstrings political authority because political authority can't move past it, and the canon law is too restrictive to create strong central governments. Also, how great is the phrase hamstrung? It hamstrung it. The Pope can also excommunicate people. If you do not know what excommunicate means, it means you essentially kick people out of the church, and usually that also connotes that you kick them out of heaven as well. And theoretically, then I guess they would go to hell. Purgatory. And they often did this to people like kings who had challenged their power that they did not like. So there's a lot of personal vendettas sometimes and stuff like that. There were a lot of really corrupt popes. Do not read about them. It's kind of super bonkers. They also had the ability to deny religious rights to all people born in a realm. Religious rites like that, R-A-T-E-S, are like rituals that you do upon like birth, death, marriages, stuff like that. So like baptisms, marriages, um, the last rites upon death. And again, the last rites upon death were thought to be the things that were like the last step into heaven and stuff like that. So if somebody was denied the last rites, usually people would get super upset about it. And like baptism was the first step to getting into heaven. So like a lot of babies and stuff like that, you had to baptize them like immediately because they believed that if you weren't baptized, you were going to hell. So even though like these little babies, they would essentially be like, if you're not baptized, that's what's happening. So a lot of times they would baptize them like immediately or as soon as they could, or even like sort of retroactively baptize them. All the things all at once. Why? France. Rye, wheat, salt, cloth, wine, all the good stuff. But not all together. That sounds terrible. What's your sandwich made out of? Wood, wax, fur, salt. Sorry, it's starting to get to the time of day where I have to entertain myself. Oh, specialization is such a long word. Ugh. Don't worry, ladies. There's still some really awesome gals going on in here. Man, this is a long slide. How did I fit all this stuff in? Oh, Britannia, Britannia rules the sea. I love how I'm recording all of these videos like in 1 or 2 days, but you're watching them over a whole bunch of days, and so I have so many days to get Hail Britannia stuck in your head. Or It's a Small World, whichever you prefer. All right, I finished writing down all of the things, so I'm going to start talking about it. Once we sort of hit that, hey, the world's not going to end. Maybe we should make it a better place. Change really starts to roll in rather quickly. And again, it doesn't feel quick because it's like 300 years. But still, if you think about like how fast we've changed as a nation in 250 years, you might get a good sense of how we're doing with things. So there are two main trading hubs, one in the north, one in the south, and they meet to trade stuff in France. Northern goods are things like wood, wax, furs, rye, wheat, salt, cloth, wine, good things all. I mean, if you're going to be trading in France, it's like, hello, wine. And then the southern goods have more of the trade with Asia. Silks, drugs, spices, precious stones. When we say drugs, though, we do not mean like things today that we consider to be drugs. We mean more like prescription drugs kind of a thing, painkillers, stuff like that, medicines that you would use to like help anesthetize people, stuff like that, headache cures or common cold cures, stuff like that. Although please do remember that during the Crusades, the Europeans come over and they're like, this lady had a headache, so we drilled a hole in her head, and the Arabs were just horrified. Why would you do that? More urbanization means more specialization as well. We get guilds. And this also actually, for a while, provides women more opportunities to work. But by the 1400s, the guilds are gone, and women are much more restricted in the workplace. Technology replaces a lot of women's roles, and professions pass from father to son, so it's not like women are like popping right in there and taking over the businesses or anything. But religious life provides opportunities for women. They can go into the nunnery and become nuns as well. Between the 13th and 11th and 13th centuries, rulers start to bring their power together. States begin to appear. They have their own languages. We have France, we have England, we have Spain, we have Scandinavia. But Italy has city-states, city states, and Germany has principalities up until like the 1800s. For real though, there's so many city states and principalities in Italy and Germany in the 1800s, and Italy does not come together as a country, and Germany does not come together as a country until like 1882 or something like that. And then they're like, hey, let's make up for all this missed time. Let's try to conquer the world. Here is a fabulous picture of a craftsman. What the heck is he doing? Nobody knows. Let's see if there's any more pictures. Check out all those German principalities. Oh my god, there's so many of them. And that is where we are going to end for today because my timer just went off all the way to page 4. Look at you guys go. We will continue this tomorrow. I hope you have a really nice rest of your day. See you later.